Alright guys, I've been playing a ton of S.H.I.E.L.D. S.H.I.E.L.D. is the new affiliation running around Marvel Crisis Protocol. I'm 40 games deep with them, so we're going to talk about my experiences, as well as the list I've kind of settled on as what I think is their most competitive build, or at least the build that I am the most comfortable playing. So we start off the build with Nick Fury, but it's really difficult to talk about Nick Fury or the faction without first talking about their staple tactics card, so we're going to be a little out of order here, and we're going to talk about Eye in the Sky real quick. Eye in the Sky is an unaffiliated tactics card that has a special bonus with S.H.I.E.L.D. It says it comes back every cleanup phase. It's essentially Trickster. If you're not familiar, Trickster essentially is a wall of text that's on Loki's card. It has some similar effects in other places, but friendly characters attacked. In this case, Nick Fury pays 3 power. The character can walk out of range or line of sight of the attack, and then the attack stops. The opponent gets an action back if it only targeted one thing. So like if you lay down a beam, you can just walk one guy off the beam and you just get free value there, or you can walk people out of range of attacks to keep them alive. It gives S.H.I.E.L.D. this real evasive nature, the same way that like it's hard to get into spiders because of Gwen's lifesaver. They have that in a global way through a tactics card. Its downside is it's only once per round, but it's incredibly powerful. This is the only defensive mechanic that Nick Fury brings, but because it can impact the entire board, it creates this uncertainty in your opponent that makes it really hard for them to have really fantastic turns against you if Fury's alive and Fury has 3 power. So let's talk about Fury. He has 2 really good attacks, 5-die Pierce, range 2 with Bleed, and then a 5-die Pierce range 3 that's just an auto point builder. Both those are really good attacks for a 4 threat. They're not the best attacks in the game. Like, you still have to look at freaking X-23 for like the best attacks per point, but they're really strong attacks. And then his spender is just a flat 7 dice, and then the grunts get to make an attack. Obviously, we haven't talked about the elephant in the room, which is grunts. A lot of people have problems with how grunts were implemented, including me. But in my opinion, grunts were really implemented for Nick Fury, and they really feel like that. The grunts feel really flavorful, really impactful. I really enjoy how they play on the table. Now, is this model worth adding grunts to the game? Probably not, but I'm having a blast with them. And I also want to lay out there that I have no power problem with grunts. It's entirely me being persnickety about design. All right. So Nick Fury can spend 2 power to bring the grunts back. When the grunts are damaged, he gets a power as long as they're within 3. The grunts get a reroll to attack and defense while within 3, meaning that their 4-die shots are pretty similar to 5-die attacks, which is really strong for a free model, and then creates this kind of theme that we're going to see throughout my S.H.I.E.L.D. roster, just kind of S.H.I.E.L.D. as a faction in general, that they just have a lot of actions. Either characters can take free attacks, can take more than 2 attacks a turn, can take out of activation attacks. In Nick Fury's case, his ideal situation of like maximum damage is him and the grunts start within 3 of an opponent. The grunts tap the person twice, hopefully making Fury 2 power. And then Fury spends 6 power over his activation, spending 3 twice to make him do a 7, and the grunts do a 3, or do a 4, reroll 1, potentially 6 attacks. Obviously 6 power seems like a lot, but keep in mind every time that the grunts attack, they can potentially build you a power. So this could happen with as little power on Fury to start his activation as 3, which is obviously incredibly strong. Like, it is a lot of output. Like, the attacks are weak, especially for like the threat of the character, but like 6 actions is nothing to be sneezed at. Fury can bring the grunts back for 2 power. The grunts get to auto pick up something. That's pretty good. The grunts being able to drop the extract wherever you want is maybe the most broken ability in the entire game. Like, it's really up there. Like, I can't stress how dumb of a rule this is. Like, if this was Nick Fury's leadership, this would be the best faction in the game, hands down. Thankfully, it's not. But like this effect is really good, and it makes the grunts a thing you can put in danger while holding an objective with little risk, because there's not a ton of models that can both get to the grunts and get to wherever they drop the extract and kill them. So as long as you have an activation remaining, you can put the grunts kind of in danger, and if they kill them, you can go scoop up the objective. This continues another trend that we're going to explore here, but Nick Fury really benefits from objectives that modify the strength of attacks, because he has this little dirtily set of 3 guys running around that have fairly weak attacks, but a built-in reroll on every attack means that the attack can be fairly strong if you can modify it in some way. So like hammers and Montessi are very, very strong with Nick. All right, let's talk about like my affiliated characters here. Oh, sorry, one last thing about Nick. Nick is much more fragile than he seems. He's only 11 hit points. 434 is an above average stat line for a 4 threat, but the hit points are below average. So he is squishy for his threat. Now, so a lot of the game plan is keeping Nick safe. And then finally, let's talk about the leadership. The leadership is like the worst part of this faction by a lot. It's interesting and it can do some really wild things, but it is not a huge part of their power budget. So how it works is if they're losing, they score 1 point for the round if a model's dazed, not per turn. Just so every time you move the turn marker or the round marker, you can score up to 1 point, assuming you're behind. And then obviously if you're only chasing one, a model getting dazed or KO'd can put you into the other side of the leadership. And the other side of the leadership is pay 1 for aggressive. It's a huge wall of text, but it's pay 1 for aggressive. So if you take damage, you pay 1 power, and then you can walk towards the model after the attack is resolved. It's very strange in that you have to pay the power on damage, and then you resolve it after the effect is resolved. This shouldn't really come up that much, but it is good to keep in mind. And usually the timing won't matter, but there are moments like things like hidden run being involved can wildly change where you're allowed to aggressive to. All right, moving on to affiliated characters. The affiliated characters I play are Iron Man, Hawkeye, Corebox Widow, Bucky, She-Hulk, and Warmachine. So that's a huge portion of the faction. This faction is kind of like Avengers in that being affiliated is pretty important. So for Avengers, it's because Avengers Assemble. Here, it's because all the S.H.I.E.L.D. tactics cards require S.H.I.E.L.D. affiliation. And then also, S.H.I.E.L.D. enjoys playing fairly wide. Like, they don't ever go maximum wide, and they rarely ever want to be more than 1 wider than their opponent. But being able to go wide on scenarios where it's good is a strength of theirs. So you need more affiliated characters to do that. The other thing that's weird here is you'll notice that a ton of my characters cost 3 threat. Almost all the good characters in S.H.I.E.L.D. cost 3 threat. It's just kind of the thing you have to deal with. So Iron Man, after the patch, he was overbuffed. Even though he only has a 4 dice builder, it's essentially a 6 dice builder because it's so reliable for him to constantly get his 2 power back. He's also one of the handful of models in S.H.I.E.L.D. that can like take a punch, like reduce damage by 1, def 4 on physical is a big deal. Also, he has like the repulsor is one of the few pushes in S.H.I.E.L.D., so having it around all the time is fantastic. I also want to talk about Helios Laser. Helios Laser is borderline core to the plan of the list. S.H.I.E.L.D., again, has this thing where they just get to make a lot of attack actions. It's not really obvious when you look at the list, but it is not out of the ordinary to make more than 10 attacks in a turn, which is a wild number of attacks. I don't know if you've ever counted your attacks playing like a normal faction, playing something like Asgard or Cabal. Your attacks is going to be like probably in the realm of 8, like 5 to 8 attacks. Obviously, point level matters a lot, but like I have played games at like 19 points where I have made 15 attacks in a turn, and like it wasn't even like an ideal setup. Like I had to take walks. It wasn't like everybody double tapped. So they just make a lot of low quality attacks. So what this means is that things that you have to go up and over, so like things that are reduced damage flat, and just characters that are just like hard to kill in general, are a weakness of S.H.I.E.L.D. So like Thanos, Juggernaut, Kingpin, those kind of models, you need a big laser to kill. So Helios is really close to core. This does a lot, or this combines well with the fact that a bunch of these characters don't spend power well. So this is a great way to just like dump a ton of power into a big, huge effect and get their big piece that you can't get off the table. So for these reasons, Iron Man is the number 2 slot in Nick Fury pretty much always. After that, I have Hawkeye and Bucky. Hawkeye and Bucky are the guys that fight for the other core slot. It depends on matchup. Bucky is maybe the best character, or the character that benefits the most from hammers, and number 2 is Nick Fury. So this faction plays hammers absurdly. Like Bucky with a hammer is just a bananas model. Like how much damage he gets to do over the course of the game, and from a pretty wild amount of safety, is really strong. And then he can make up to 6 attacks in a turn with, if you can get him in a position where he can like double Red Fury and then hit both his rapid fires for 6 attacks in his activation, combined with I've Got Your Back, and obviously the grunts daze fairly often. Not as much as the internet seems to think. It's not like you're taking I've Got Your Back attacks constantly. But like your models will daze, you're playing fairly wide. I've Got Your Back is just more attacks, and if you have the hammer, it makes it even better. He's also one of the other few pushes in faction. And again, just like Iron Man, it is any size, which is really helpful for like pushing those big boys off of points and kind of securing the objective game. A thing when you look at the roster of S.H.I.E.L.D. that's not obvious is that they play both attrition and scenario above average. Every scenario team is better than them at scenario, and but I'm not 100% sure that every attrition team is better than them at attrition. I actually only think a handful of them are. And then they can use the combination of Eye in the Sky and scenario pressure to just like eke out an advantage in that way. Let's round out the 3-threat slot. So Warmachine. Warmachine is the newest addition here. I used to have Voodoo as a way to like kind of fight Legacy Virus. I don't think it's worth it. I don't think Voodoo brings enough. And he kind of creates this weakness in the faction where like you just have like a lot of Def 2 energy for flip scenarios. And I think you just kind of... There are just like situations where you'd want Voodoo that he's just like really subpar. I also just kind of don't enjoy playing the character. Like the character is undeniably powerful, but like I think his play pattern is kind of just like not that fun to play. Like he walks and attacks or double attacks, and then is like what? Like, can I possess something? Can I throw something? Like it's just not my favorite. So trying out Warmachine as another frontliner, reduced damage by 1 is fantastic. I think you play him on the narrow scenarios, either on like, what is it, C or E, where you're either the horizontal line or the vertical line, or where he's best. Or if you're playing against a faction where you know you need Helios to be online as quick as possible, so another model that doesn't really do much. Their power is really useful. And then the other thing that's really interesting about him is he has both a beam and like this weird... It's not a rapid fire, it's like a 2-tap. You shoot people that are near each other with the rocket pods. So again, it's just another model that makes more than 1 attack for an attack action, right? Which is really what you want like all your models to do. So he continues to fit that. We continue to just pump damage out with low quality attacks, and we just take tons of them. All right, let's round out the S.H.I.E.L.D. roster. We have Core Widow. I think just having another 2-pointer gives you a lot of flexibility, and when you want to go wide on like flip scenarios or wide scenarios where you think you're out attrition, Core Widow is really underrated. Her being affiliated lets me essentially play 2/2s anytime I want, where I think going wider is a good idea. The weak energy defense is obnoxious, but martial artist and the high mental defense combined with stealth make her, I think, really an above average too. I think she's really underrated. I like her a lot. But again, she's a scenario runner only. She doesn't deal damage. Finally, for our affiliateds, round out with She-Hulk. She-Hulk is a flex pick for essentially exactly 2 rosters. You want her for Criminal Syndicate because Criminal Syndicate is going to put just a ton of beef on the table that has large sizes that you have to like damage over the top. They reduce damage down to 0, which is not our favorite. We want to like reduce damage by 1. This faction is just going to make enough attacks to just kill you through it by just like doing 1 ticky tack damage here and there. Criminal Syndicate, that's not going to work on, so you really need her in a Criminal Syndicate. While this, I don't think is the best She-Hulk, obviously drop off She-Hulk or special delivery She-Hulk is the strongest version of the character. I think this is the safest because you can really use Eye in the Sky to keep her safe, and then you can also use Battlefield Medicine, which we'll talk about later, to pull those pesky conditions off that really like neuter She-Hulk's strength. You can pull a stagger or a stun, and you can just keep She-Hulk running full tilt and, you know, like murdering things like Juggernaut or Kingpin himself. The other place that I would like play her is there's like this weird gear check Brotherhood list running around that's like Juggernaut, Magneto, Thanos, which is just like 3 characters that like S.H.I.E.L.D. essentially does nothing to. And She-Hulk is kind of your solution for that. Essentially, if you think that they're going to drop Juggernaut into you, I think you should be looking at She-Hulk. I'm not great at playing She-Hulk yet, so I've had the least amount of success here, and as a result, I think the matchups where you need to play her are their weakest matchups, but that might be my skill biting me here. All right, let's talk about our splash characters. I'm splashing 3 characters. Top of the list is Venom. Venom is the only value one here. He's not the... Everybody else is kind of like a tech pick. Venom with aggressive is just not okay. There is almost no counterplay. I've said for a long time that like the way that you beat Venom isn't shooting him with energy attacks. It's attacking him from outside range 3 so that he can't counterattack and heal. Whenever you're giving him the opportunity to counterattack, you're just like putting a massive amount of dice risk on the table. And Venom can just like spike damage on the counterattack and you can just end up doing nothing. You just heal all his hit points back. And that normally costs 5 power for Venom. Now for 1 more, a 6th power, he can also walk at you, which means if you're someone like Medusa, who normally like kind of dunks Venom because you hit the wild push and you get to do your damage and you push him away and everything's hunky-dory, he can just walk back at you and then counterattack you. If you're somebody that shoots from range 5 like Hawkeye, Venom can reach you and counterattack you, which is unbelievable. Like, his aggressive counterattack is the longest range in the game. It hits you from 5. So the only characters that are like safe from this Venom counterattack is like Shuri, somebody with an auto push on their attack that is shooting you from range 5. Because at range 4, you can walk and attack Shuri. Or not at range slightly beyond range 3, you can walk and attack Shuri. Which means that Venom can win the Venom on Shuri fight, which he normally automatically loses. He just has to get within 3 before she starts attacking him, which is wild. I don't... This is the biggest argument for like this leadership not being okay. This is the only model in the game I think that really abuses it. You can do some cute stuff with like the characters that have beams and on the narrow scenarios where like they can fail to kill you, and then you can go aggressive and set up a really strong beam. But on Venom, the mixture of the counterattack and the healing, just it feels super oppressive. It feels like there's no counterplay. Feels bad, man. Feels bad. All right, I have Bullseye as my other two. Bullseye, I think, fits kind of like the theme of what we're trying to do here. His attacks are low quality, but they always do 1 damage, which is exactly what you want out of a shield character. And then when his power gets high, you can spend it for more attacks. People also attack him, and he gets to chip 1 damage in, which is kind of like taking an extra attack, because that's all he does, right? Is he does 1 damage. He also has bleed, and randomly, like, this whole team has just like a bucket of bleed, like by accident. I did this. Nick Fury has bleed on his knife. Hawkeye has bleed on the bow. Bucky has bleed on the gun. Warmachine has bleed on Iron Storm, his beam, and then Bullseye has bleed on his knives. So just like, that's extra little ticky-tack damage that comes through for you. And I think just Bullseye just fits exactly what we're looking for. And again, he's like evasive and can do things like, aggressive onto a point when you're trying to kill him, but still throw the knife at you, or still do the parting shot to you. So you have to you often have to overcommit to him because you don't know where he's going to end up. There's like a lot of mid-movement shenanigans going on that can make it hard for you to predict what's going to happen with Bullseye. Finally, I have Luke Cage. Luke Cage is for a couple of matchups. First of all, having S.H.I.E.L.D. is a lot of guns. Like, their best models are guns. We talk about Nick Fury, Iron Man, Hawkeye, Bucky are all guns. They just like to deal damage. So having a model that is both a bodyguard to protect the squishy versions of those, and has reduced damage by 1 and is able to brawl up front, is a key thing that we're looking for. And then Heroes for Hire really helps us out in some of the tougher matchups, or like anywhere Heroes for Hire is good. Like into anybody playing Corvus, this is a really useful thing. Plus, sometimes he just hits his stagger on his attack. Never rely on it. I stress that enough. Never rely on hitting the double wild on the melee attack. But when you do, it feels incredible and will change your entire game plan. I like Luke Cage here a lot. I think there's maybe an argument now that I've brought in Warmachine that maybe he doesn't need to be here. But I do think that a Heroes for Hire character is very useful. So maybe he'll become Danny Rand later on. Moving on, let's talk about tactics cards. I have 10 tactics cards, but S.H.I.E.L.D. has this weird thing going on where they have a card that is arguably better than MedPack in Battlefield Medicine. Battlefield Medicine costs the same power as MedPack, has the same heal 3 as MedPack, same timing window, same range, all that stuff. It also clears the condition. Its downside is that a S.H.I.E.L.D. character has to play it. It can still heal a non-S.H.I.E.L.D. character, but a S.H.I.E.L.D. character has to play it. This is really a strong card because it allows us to play essentially 3 restricted cards. So oftentimes you start with your 3 restricted cards. For me, I've chosen Field Dressing and Brace to give me as much attrition power as possible. I imagine there's a build of S.H.I.E.L.D. that plays Bitter Rivals and tries to force you on narrow scenarios. My build is much more extract focused, and then is kind of able to play on any of the scenarios. Its secures are wide, mostly to make it as hard as possible to play around Eye in the Sky. So, vast majority of my games start with those 3 restricted cards, and then Eye in the Sky. Okay, so now I have 6 cards fighting for my last slot. It almost always ends up being Helios. If this is an attrition matchup, those are the 5 cards I'm playing. Like, if your models are going to try to kill me, I'm playing those. Even into something like Guardians, who maybe have gone as wide as possible, you will still find Helios useful to take a key piece or a must-win attack to just take something off the board. Like, if you can pull the Winged tokens off the board for the next turn on a day's Star-Lord by just dumping your power, that's a great use. That wildly changes the strength of Guardians. It can also be really useful to go over the top of spiders or a way to kill Venom, which we struggle with. All right, for all the reasons we've mentioned before. So that means that all of my other cards, like my other 5 cards, are essentially flex picks. I have Shield Mobile in here. Shield Mobile is a broken card. The card is absurd. Like 3 power, move a character long is very, very strong. You're like, oh, Vince, well, if the card's so broken, why aren't you playing it? The problem is that there's this opportunity cost problem. Is that if we're playing the attrition matchup, I don't have the slot. Like if I had 6 slots, I'd play Shield Mobile a ton, but I don't. And I think that just Helios edges it out. The healing edges it out. Eye in the Sky is the reason to be playing the faction. Shield Mobile is cute for like mission objective stuff, but again, we're just a faction that's pretty good at playing the missions. So just play the missions fairly. You don't really need a cheese here, and we don't have models that have that giving them an extra action really explode their strength. Right, we're a lot of really ticky tack damage. Our exception here is Venom, who can't play the card unless I play another card, the initiative, which I think I've made my opinion pretty clear on is a terrible card. You should not be playing it. If you could play 6 or 7 tactics cards in a game, maybe we can talk about it. But right now, you can't give up a tactics card slot for a gadget token and the ability to play other cards. And She-Hulk with double aggressive, and like it's hard to really invalidate She-Hulk. I think it is here for like the Webs and Criminal Syndicate matchup, or the matchups where they're going to push She-Hulk away, and I want to play She-Hulk. I think Shield Mobile is a totally worthwhile card to be looking into for that. It is on the cusp of being cut from my roster, though. Other Shield cards are playing defensive prototype, narrow scenarios, especially in a Criminal Syndicate, who are putting you on something like a Researcher or Gamma. This card is really good, like being like these 2 characters can't be moved. It has the same web fog issue where like if you trap somebody in it, you can like blind them and they can't attack anyone. And that's made more ridiculous by the fact that like every model can have aggressive. You can like move it around and like do really dumb stuff with it. It's a pretty corner case. I like it into Webs, Wakanda, and Criminal Syndicate on narrow scenarios where you know they're going to play scenario. Like you don't want to drop this into Killconda. Although it's still like pretty okay because Killconda plays no way to alter this because Mind Thanos is not popular anymore. So this card's pretty good. So that's it for my Shield cards. You will notice that I'm not playing Sit Rep, which is the tactical analysis type card where you like pay 1 power and you get to move a character. I just don't have the space. Not in the 10, but in the 5. I just can't think of a way to break the card. I think like having that effect is probably always useful. Will it be as useful as heal 3, stand a character up, prevent a damage, roll 25 dice at a character, and it's definitely never going to be better than Eye in the Sky. So like that's my problem, is that it's just like never better than those cards, so there's no reason for it to be here. Maybe in the scenario matchups, you play it over defensive prototype. I don't like that. I feel like it's like the scenario matchups tend to, like those models tend to get to go last. Like the scenario teams tend to like have last activation, so you have no window to play that card to like save what's going on or to like save yourself some points. So I tend not to play it. So as a result, it's not here. The other thing that's not here is Fury's teleport card, reposition. There's been a lot of hubbub about how broken this card is, how easy it is to like get herbs on turn 1 or turn 2 and put it across the board, score your 4 points. I think it's a cheese. If you're not familiar with the term cheese, it comes from like StarCraft and other RTS games, which talk about strategies that you essentially go all in on. And like you're like, I'm gonna win with this, or the game ends. And usually they're built in such a way that like an experienced player or a player of similar skill should beat it. They're not like designed strategies for the health of the game, if that makes sense. So there's things like cannon rushing someone, or all in doing an all in rush on someone in the early game of like an RTS. Here, I just think that, so if we go for like the turn one herbs play, you have to play Wong to get the extra power on Fury. You have to play reposition, and you have to play advanced R&D. So that's what we're committing to. This is so many resources, right? We're playing effectively 2 points down because like Wong is not part of our game plan after that, and then advanced R&D and reposition are taking up 2 tactics card slots in the best tactics cards faction, right? And so we get it. Let's say it goes great. We score our points. What our opponent's counterplay should be is they should all in our herb. The vast majority of their force should go at the herb and just make sure Fury never scores it again. Because you'll largely, like, know where his stuff is going to end up. You can also counterplay this if it looks like they're going for it, because if Fury has priority, the earliest he can do it is activation 3. Wong has to go give him power. Somebody else has to go give him a power with advanced R&D, and then he can double walk, grab the herb, and teleport. That's enough time for the opponent to take 2 models and block the herb so that Fury has no landing spot. There's just a tremendous amount of ways to play around it, and it requires a tremendous amount of investment in resources, and I think he can make slightly worse big objective plays for no resources whatsoever. And we'll talk about that when we get to my extracts, but I think this team is very good at extracts. So I'm not playing it. Let's talk about my unaffiliateds. Playing Indomitable. Indomitable very strong into the scenario teams. Webs, Wakanda, CS gives us a helping hand into those. I'm playing Marked for Death. This is probably the slot that's the most up in the air. I'm playing a lot of guns. Web Warriors, I think, is one of the worst matchups for us. They have a lot of stealth. Being able to take away stealth and then spray like a Moon Knight down or whatever, I think is helpful. We'll try it out. I have very few games with this. We talked about Helios. I'm playing Heroes for Hire as, tech for Black Order, essentially, or Corvus. Essentially preventing them from just like running train on my kind of low toughness models, and just like creating more problems where they have to play around both Heroes for Hire and Eye in the Sky seems like just a nightmare for Black Order. Like, it seems really bad. I only have 1 Black Order game with them. I managed to win it. I think the matchup's really good. This still needs a ruling on the forum, but I'm 90% sure this is how this works. Is that if, let's say on turn 1, you go up and you pick up a thing with the grunts, they reel the grunt in and they kill it. The opponent with the Thanos leadership scores 1 point, right? Putting you lower, and then your after effect is resolved, triggers happen, giving you, you're now losing, giving you the 1 point back. Right? From there, you don't resummon the grunts, at least until you've Helios lasered Thanos. So the idea that the leadership makes Fury very weak into Thanos, I don't really think that's true. The hardest part about that matchup is keeping Fury alive and with enough power to relevantly play Eye in the Sky. It's really tough. It helps if it's... So the matchup I played, it was on cubes, so it made it really easy. I just picked up a cube with Fury. I need more games with it. I suspect that S.H.I.E.L.D. is favored. All right, let's talk about my scenarios. Extracts is probably the easiest thing to talk about. Montessi and Hammers are 2 of the most busted scenarios with these guys because of how specific models interact with those scenarios. Everybody loves Hammers. If you look at the stats for how often Hammers is played, it is like 500 or 600 games more played than any other extract. It is far, far above every other extract's play rate. This faction is the best Hammers faction. It is not close. There is nobody that it is close for. They're so good at Hammers. Every model ranges from okay with a hammer to I make 4 attacks a turn with a hammer, right? They get so much more out of hammers than anybody else. Just like what they do with hammer, it's just silly, and everybody plays the scenario. If the meta changes and hammers isn't popular anymore, I suspect the strength of shield will drop. But if you can get on, if your opponent ends up dropping hammers and you drop, I don't know, some scenario they're not great on, that should be a favorite scenario for you. It actually kind of doesn't matter what their secure is if they drop hammers. You have a lot of really good plays. People also mention that if you have priority, Fury can walk up and grab both hammers on turn 1, one with the grunts, one with himself. I actually think this is a bad play. I've done it a couple times. It has a handful of problems. First of all, Fury is the only model in the game that is not expendable for you, and you've put him on the midline in a serious amount of danger, and he has no defensive mechanics. And then furthermore, his one defensive mechanic, Eye in the Sky, you've made harder to play because you're holding a hammer, so you need 4 power now, which means they can probably kill Fury before it's online. So that's not great. What I prefer to do is go and grab it with one of my reduced damage by 1 characters, and then line Fury up at the other hammer, so whoever they put on it, I can walk up with the grunts, take a shot with the grunts, walk up with Fury, take a shot with Fury, getting Fury's power game rolling, and essentially threatening to then take that character off the table, because if they both did damage, that'll put Fury at 4 power on turn to open turn 2. The grunts will have 2 attacks to try to make him his 6 power, and then he can do a spender into them, and then they get another chance to make him a power, taking him up to a potential 7 power, but probably still 6, and then that can give him either another spender into that character or Eye in the Sky available. I think that's a really strong opener in comparison. Montessi, you get to, on turn 1, walk up with the grunts, pick it up, and pick up the other one with Fury, essentially leaving your opponent no shenanigans to play. If they kill a grunt, you don't care. They should be able to drop it and leave it somewhere where you can grab it. The grunts really abuse Montessi because they have reroll 1 on their attack, and now they get to make a 6-die beam, and they have reroll 1 on every person they put under that beam, making it better in their hands than most characters in the game. The other character that they have that makes them really good at Montessi is Iron Man, because Iron Man's Friday AI boosts all of the attack action, so that's just an 8-die beam when you spend 2 power on it. Iron Man's power economy gets kind of rough when you do that, but I don't know, just a 3-threat character walking around making 8-die beams is just very strong, making them like one of the best Montessi factions. The Venom splash makes Montessi pretty silly. Counterattacking with the beam is hilarious, right? Just being like, like you attack Venom and then like, okay, you deal 3 damage to Venom, so Venom gets 3 power, and Venom can spend 1 to like adjust his positioning and get more people under the beam with the leadership, and then beam multiple people, and it's just so much free value. Finally, we have cubes. Cubes lets you do kind of silly stuff. Cubes is probably the best scenario to draw. It's not. You'd much rather play on the other 2 always. But cubes is cute because if they go up and they pick up the middle one, like they have priority, they pick up the middle one, you can have the grunts double walk to the far, and assuming that they can't displace the grunts or just shoot them from where they're standing with like a long mover, you can then just count on the grunts dying, place it back in a spot that is over the midline, and have another character just double walk and grab it, giving you hopefully a 3-2 advantage where you went second on a disadvantage secure, or on an odd secure, where typically when you're on like cubes, whoever goes first is advantaged. That's not the case with S.H.I.E.L.D. You get to kind of break that symmetry or that expected result, which I think is really nice. Also, cubes deal ticky-tack damage to your opponents, which is what the faction is doing. The extra damage flowing around is really helpful for you. You use the extra power okay, mostly because of, like getting to Helios faster. I think it's fine. I think it's better than Spider Infected, which is the other one you can do this on. Let's move on to Secures. Secures, I'm less certain about everything on. I'm currently playing Infinity Formula Scoundrels Extremis. Extremis, I have mixed feelings on. I like it because it's wide, and I like the healing on my characters, allowing me to stack 3 healing cards with a healing objective. The problem is like our ticky-tack damage can fall flat over and over and over again and get you in this situation where they're constantly healing. Playing this into somebody like Asgard, who is healing 1 from their leadership and then healing 1 from the objective, can mean that you just like don't really whittle down their Def 4 characters, because the math on like a 4-die strike into a 4-die defense is like coin flip to do 1 damage, which is not where you want to live when the character is healing 2 a turn. So I'm kind of iffy on this. This could become Invasion, but I like the D shape. Scoundrels seems kind of like a weird pick for a gun line, but we have a bunch of characters just like randomly ignore cover that we've picked in our roster, so that's why I'm playing this. Hawkeye, Bullseye, and Venom ignore cover. Nick Fury has Pierce, so sometimes he just gets to kind of ignore cover. And the whole faction loves cover, because we're all like a little bit... we're like kind of tanky for our threat, but not really, and reduce damage by 1 in a gunfight we could really use, especially with the models we have that get to ignore it. And also I've just been really good at playing Scoundrels lately. I've played a ton of it with Web, so I'm just kind of playing what's comfortable. Lastly, I'm playing Infinity Formula. Infinity Formula I'm playing because I love the shape. The B shape is really great. The power gets us to Helios faster, and then a handful of characters can use it really well, namely Nick Fury. All right, so that's the list. Let's talk about cute plays that we can do. So this one needs I think it needs a ruling on, but I'm super confident that this works. But I have a post on the forum waiting adjudication to see whether it does. But Hawkeye and Eye in the Sky have a ton of fun interactions. So, all of them require your opponent to be attacking Hawkeye with a range 4 gun, but having moved inside 3 to avoid, or in this first scenario, they've moved inside 3 to avoid being fast drawed. So Hawkeye, if you don't know, he can pay 2 power to attack you before you attack him. This is how Hawkeye fits into the more attacks than 2 a turn theme, because he can make counterattacks. So you attack Hawkeye. He's within 3. All right, I got you. Well, you can pay for Eye in the Sky, walk out of 3, but stay inside the attack range, and then pay your 2 and buy your fast draw and shoot the model first. Sometimes this will kill the model. Sometimes it'll put shock on them so that they aren't really in a position to kill Hawkeye, especially if Hawkeye was able to like walk into cover, and it's a physical attack. So you're like, I'm Def 4 in cover, and I've shocked you, so you have 1 less dice. So like, you're unlikely to kill me. You can also do this the other way, where they shoot you, and let's say they're a range 4 gun at the tip of 4. You can take your counterattack, or you can take your fast draw, and then before they take their attack, if your fast draw didn't kill them, you can walk out with Eye in the Sky. This makes attacking Hawkeye a living nightmare. The interaction is super fun. If your opponent tries to play around it, it means often that they're overcommitting resources to kill like Hawkeye, who is like known for being kind of a squish model. Other cool plays you can do. We've talked about aggressive in beams, and we've talked about Venom getting a hold of the beam. Well, Venom can like aggressive and counterattack with the beam from Montessi. That's really strong. Bucky also gets to use Spetsnaz training, a rule that most people just think doesn't exist on his card, a lot more than you'd expect him to because of the aggressive leadership. So if somebody's going to double tap Bucky and you don't want to play Eye in the Sky on him, they like punch him the first time. He walks to within 1, gets a defensive reroll. If he lives, he then gets to use that reroll offensively. So he can do, 4-die rapid fires, reroll 1. If he has the hammer, they can be 5-die rapid fire reroll 1s. Or he can do his spender into them. The spender's a little unfortunate, so unless you can push them into the wall, because the push is forced, you get just the reroll 1 on the 7. But I think it's a cute look. Also, If they attack people around Bucky, you can use aggressive to then set up Bucky being able to like Hydra tactics off of them. So those are all cute little like ticky tack things that are pretty fun to do. And the faction just has a lot of stuff like that. So we've talked about just like a ton of the cute plays that you can make throughout the thing, whether it's just like the hail of lead that Nick Fury can unleash, and just the multiple attacks that every character in this list can do. The faction's really cool. So like, where do they fit in the kind of overall meta? So I personally think they're the best Dark Horse faction. People are not ready for S.H.I.E.L.D. yet. They don't really understand what they do. They don't know how to beat them yet. Making it a thing that is much easier to learn to play than it is to learn to play against at the moment. So I think if you're looking to pick up a new faction and you want to like slide under the radar, not look like you're playing something super strong and then actually be playing something quite strong, I think they're great like that. They benefit from a lot of the most popular scenarios right now, namely hammers, but also Montessi and formula and cubes. They love all of that stuff. Where are they weak? I'm sorry. Let's finish out with their strengths. So, do they crack the top 5? So for me, my top 5 are, in no particular order, Avengers, Web Warriors, Black Order, Criminal Syndicate, and Guardians. Do they crack that top 5 that's kind of sitting above the rest of the pack? I don't really think so. Maybe. They play kind of like a defensive Guardians. So Guardians use winging it to kind of make models better. S.H.I.E.L.D. uses a similar tactic of just like a hail of gunfire, but their lower quality attacks, instead of improving the quality of their above average attacks, instead of making their above average attacks better, they make their below average, or instead of making their above average attacks better, they make your attacks worse, either by getting you to overcommit playing around Eye in the Sky, or pulling the trigger on Eye in the Sky, or hitting you with things like shock, or putting bleeds on you, forcing you to spend actions to not lose your characters, or just like whittling you away and removing actions from you. Where does S.H.I.E.L.D. Fall down? I think their bad matchups are probably Web Warriors, Avengers, and Criminal Syndicate. So Criminal Syndicate, I think, is probably the easiest of these matchups, largely because of how good She-Hulk is in Criminal Syndicate. But if Criminal Syndicate can get stunned onto She-Hulk early, and then when you pull it off with Medpack, start putting stuns and staggers on her with Black Cat and Kingpin, it can really limit what your 6-point model is able to do. You're really playing her to get Juggernaut off the table, because your models can't kill Juggernaut. And that's using a 6-point model to counter a 5-point model, which is kind of brutal. The matchup is okay, but difficult. Webs play scenario better than you. They have a lot of stealth, meaning that your guns are hard to use. If you look at the odds of a 4 or 5 dice attack doing damage to Miles, it's really bad. They're really not likely to do damage to Miles. And if they do, they like chip it in. Your like best tools to fighting Web Warriors are Bullseye and Venom. So I'm teched for it, but I still think that matchup's kind of rough. Avengers are probably your hardest matchup because, first of all, I just think Avengers are the best thing in the game. Second, they're playing a lot of similar tools to you. They can, like Iron Man and Hawkeye and Luke Cage are like staples of that faction. And I think they're really good in it. And, you know, Avengers Assemble's a hell of a drug. And they're just playing some of the best characters in the game. And they have some of the best leaderships in the game. And they can put you on scenarios that you don't like. Which gets me to the last spot of where S.H.I.E.L.D. falls down, is that they really don't like meteors, and they're not wild about spider portals. I have yet again selected a team that's not great at flips, We got a lot of Def 2 energy just in the squad in general, part of why I dropped Voodoo from the squad. And they don't like to be up there. They want to shoot you from range and whittle you away while winning on extracts. So the like all-in nature of meteors is very difficult for them because they kind of have to win it over and over and over again. They're like they have game on it. It's not as much of a disaster as it is for say like webs who have power problems. S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't have power problems. They have a handful of characters that couldn't spend their power if their life depended on it. Yeah, overall, I think I just like the faction a lot. I'm really looking forward to getting even more table time with them. Since Adepticon, I have played no Web Warriors games. I've played just S.H.I.E.L.D., and I am over the moon with this faction. I think it's so cool. All right, so that's going to do it for me, guys. If you have any questions about how to play S.H.I.E.L.D. or like what models you guys might want to look into in S.H.I.E.L.D. or if there are any other viable builds you guys can think of, put them down below. I'll respond to everybody. Let me know what you guys think of it. If you want to, you can subscribe and see the next time I put up one of these videos. I'm Vincent Curkov, and this has been my S.H.I.E.L.D. roster.